Nuggetifization.
There you go.
I've lost the thread.
Okay.
What is the question?
You're listening to Unfinished Minds,
A podcast about learning, teaching, and staying curious in a messy, ever-changing world.
We're Amy and Ben, partners in life and in business. We've spent the last 20 years exploring what it means to learn on purpose, whether in classrooms, in companies, or in parenting.
Each week, we pick a big question and have an honest conversation about how people grow, what it means to teach well, and why learning still matters, especially when the world feels uncertain.
Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a leader, or just a curious soul, we're glad you're here.
I'd like to lodge a complaint.
Okay, bring it on.
I just have a problem with the notion that you're a learner while you're in school as a kid, maybe while you're at college or university, and then you get a piece of paper at the end of it and you're not a learner anymore. That learning portion of your life has been done and you've spent all these hours, years, really, sort of immersed in it. I'd like to take a look at learning in small bites, in nugget form, if you will.
Let's do it.
Okay. I want to talk about sort of some of the experiences I've had kind of on both ends of this, on the nugget end and on the long form end, maybe sort of compare and contrast. I do philosophy with kids, both from a distance and sometimes in person. I've had great experiences as an educator with teeny tiny thinkers who were just small and young. And, we got 3 to 5 minutes of brilliant learning. And then they were back to their Legos, or they needed a snack, or they had to go to the bathroom. And that was fine. I have a lot of parents who are worried, a lot of educators that are worried when their child only sort of seems to sit still for learning for a handful of minutes and then can't continue at the time. And I want to dispel that myth that you have to have long stretches of learning. You can't have these little moments and not have them be meaningful and useful. I've also been kind of on the other end of things as a grad student and as an undergrad, sitting through 3 hours of lectures and that sort of thing. And I've delivered those kind of learning experiences too. And I don't know. I honestly can't say that there was more learning that happened in those long stretches, those long drawn out lectures, than there was in those 3 minutes with a 6-year-old.
Yeah, and certainly the same point bears true for adult learning, for professional learning. And like you, I've been on both sides of the 3-hour lecture
or the 4-year degree.
And I'm excited to talk about alternatives.
So let's talk about some instances, some situations, some learners for whom learning in small bits is beneficial and more useful. When is nugget-based learning or nuggetified learning more advantageous than learning in long stretches?
Are we using nuggetified?
Nuggetified. I have just made it up.
Ironically, I think that's one of the longest ways you could have said.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
Well, I mean, I don't think nugget is a super technical term. Even if you're getting pieces of chicken, I think it's a bit broad in defining small pieces. But really, I think that's what we're going for, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about, at its extremes, the difference between a long-form, multi-hour learning experience and a short little experience that might be with an educator or might be on your own. I don't think we're trying to be extremely pedantic in how we define this. And I think as we go through our conversation, we're going to explore a few different ways and dimensions to what we mean by nuggetizing learning.
And I don't think we want to throw out the whole idea of long form learning, because there are instances where you're into something or you have to be into something by necessity, and that's fine.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I've been thinking about how I personally consume YouTube content. I love some hour-long videos about the repairing of electronics or the building of a wooden table. And even though, I'm looking at my hands and I have all 10 fingers because I don't actually do those things, I'm really interested in that. And so I am happy to consume long form content. And I think the same can be true for lectures that you have the right audience member, the right presenter. Long form content is not bad intrinsically. And the reason I like that long stuff, it's because I'm already interested in the topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to account for someone's level of interest as something that directly impacts the duration of their attention. Even kids who struggle to read. I mean, it has forever been a stratagem to practice reading with comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Or kids who may not be interested in picking up a book will have memorized the statistics
Mm-hmm.
of their baseball cards. I mean, these stories are generations old, and it speaks to people's motivation and their interest. And I think we have to kind of convolve the interest, the level of interest, with the acceptable duration of a learning experience. The problem, of course, is we don't all, or very few of us, have the luxury of getting to spend all of our education time on things we're already passionate about. That someone, a teacher, a mentor, an educator, or even our own grit and determination has to be the thing that leads us down a path where we're willing to take in the knowledge, where we're willing to invest the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, when you're not already interested, things need to be relatively short so that you can take some time to absorb the content, not get bored. Maybe there's practice. Maybe there's interaction. Maybe there's reinforcement. All those strategies that are just parts of pedagogy. A big part of that is about selling the learner on continuing to learn.
Mm-hmm. And I love that, continuing to learn. That these nuggets don't have to exist as discrete and separate from one another. You can collect them the way you would collect, I don't know, whatever people collect today. Think of it as a charm bracelet. You've got these isolated sort of little mini moments of micro learning, and you put them together. And you're right. If there's interest in one little nugget, maybe there's interest in another. And I've certainly seen this happen with children, that it's not one long stretch of learning, but it's a collection, a string of smaller moments. And that string of smaller moments, that amounts to wonderful things, just like a long stretch would. I'm thinking of, someone who has learning challenges, who might be really overwhelmed by a giant wall of things to learn, but might find it much more accessible if it is in small moments that are digestible, that you can put together in, whatever configuration works for your particular learning style and needs. I'm thinking of someone who's older, who's going back to learning. Like, not that you ever stop, but who's going back to learning. And wouldn't it be wonderful and not so overwhelming if they knew that they could go in and have a bite at a time and still have that count and still have that be respected and still have that register for them?
Yeah, I like that point, that maybe going back to structured learning or formal learning or something where there is a prescribed or dictated pathway of learning. I feel like you're touching on, especially through points like accessibility and people being able to consume learning content in different ways. I don't think we're necessarily implying here that learning nuggets are something that you consume asynchronously by yourself on a phone with headphones on. Right? We're not necessarily saying that this is e-learning, that this is micro-learning experiences served up through a learning management system. It could be, but it need not be. And I don't want to perhaps imply that best way to deliver learning is to carve everything up into tiny little pieces and throw it in an LMS. I mean, that is sometimes true, but it is not always true. And even in a world in which you might be in post-secondary education and there is a 3-hour slot for a lecture, the way that professor lectures can feel like micro-learning, or it can feel like 1 3-hour experience. And we've all experienced that, where someone is providing, oftentimes the term is death by PowerPoint, where they're just talking over slides without pausing, without there being any interaction, without even leaving space for learners to stop and think. I mean, that 3-hour lecture could be thought of as a whole bunch of 10-minute
Bites. Yeah.
10-minute bites.
Yeah.
And therefore could be thought of in, the really casual vernacular we're using of nuggets. Yeah. Make it a whole bunch of 10-minute nuggets. Why not?
We've been talking about, from a learner's perspective, how nuggets might be more digestible. We're really going back to the whole nugget metaphor. We're expanding.
It is a little bit before lunchtime.
Yeah. But I think we can talk about this from an educator or a trainer's point of view too. Right. I taught post-secondary education for a long time. I despised giving long lectures. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting as an educator to be up there and mm-hmm. to have long stretches. And I'm gonna try and keep this short, my commenting on it, so that I'm not being ironic. But it was so much more fun and so much more meaningful, and I felt like I was doing my job better when it was broken into, okay, here's me talking for a few minutes to give all the necessary information as efficiently as possible. And then we go and we jump into it and we play with it and we test it out and we talk about it. And that was so much more meaningful for me as an educator than a long form of that.
Yeah. Meaningful. Also way more fun.
Yeah.
Way less painful. It's a little easier to prep. Everybody wins when the learner is involved in the learning experience. I don't know why this is so unusual in the academy.
Absolutely. And maybe we take a moment and we think. Some learning institutions are still very much married to the long form of stuff. But what if we reimagined? What does a school look like? What does a training environment look like?
So I actually have a story that I can share from my own experience. And this, oh my goodness, this goes back nearly 20 years. I'm a little surprised by that. I might need a moment.
Yeah.
I took kind of a sideways route into teaching at a college. And the first course that I taught was a very technical course about a programming language. And it happened to be something I was an expert in. And it also so happened that we had just founded our company and I had just made a video-based, self-paced e-learning course for this software package, for this programming language. And because I didn't feel like A, it would be good learning, and B, because I just didn't feel like doing it, instead of lecturing every week about features, structures, and approaches, I actually just made the e-learning course free for all the students. I let them all have access, and I gave them a 5-minute intro at the beginning and a 5-minute, like me with the whiteboard. And then at the end, I would give a summary. And I would tell them, bring your headphones and work through that while you do these exercises. Listen, watch, learn. And guess what? I am going to be here wandering around for 2 whole hours. Raise your hand if you have a question, grab me, we can chat. And I loved it. They really loved it. And what I felt like was that every single moment that I interacted with a student in that, it was kind of a mixed lab lecture thing. Every single moment that I interacted with them, I added value. I answered a specific question. I helped them get past something. There was nobody ever waiting while someone was asking a question that was irrelevant to them because they were already working ahead. It was blended learning. And, I'm really proud of that experience, the impact it had on those students, on me. And frankly, it really informed what our business became as we transitioned away from both being lecturers, educators into, forming our company.
So how does thinking of learning in nuggets change the way we see ourselves as learners? And maybe it's an outdated definition of learner, that you're only a learner if you're in school, or if you're in a program, or if you're taking a course, or if you are engaged in heavy duty studying over a long period of time. If we get rid of that and we say, a learner is someone who is learning, even if it's just in a little chunk.
Right.
Does that change the way we see ourselves?
It's almost like you're blurring the line between student and learner. We like to say learner because we speak in generalities.
Yeah.
And people, when you say student, it often conjures an image of a kid, someone in a desk, in a classroom, maybe in a lecture hall. It really does feel like what we're talking about now is blurring those lines so that you're always a student or you're always a learner. There is no line in the sand when you're handed a piece of paper. Now you enter the world and you're no longer a student. And also, part of the way I interpret your question is asking, how do we think about ourselves as learners? And how do we think about these moments or nuggets as learning experiences? It's part of our practice to always be asking about learning objectives. So when a lecture needs to be carved up, if the question is, where do I carve it up? For me, the answer is, well, what are your learning objectives?
Mhm.
What are you trying to teach in this moment? And if it cannot be stated specifically enough that a learning objective leads to a 3-hour thing,
Yeah.
then it's not a good learning
What
objective.
are you aiming at?
Right,
3
learning
hours,
objective
yeah.
can't be you understand pages 95 to 200 of the textbook.
Yeah.
That's not a learning objective. But the minute you start slicing and dicing what you want someone to learn into clearly stated learning objectives, all of a sudden the nuggetization falls out of that activity. And maybe you just have one learning objective per experience, per
There's
nugget,
the bite.
or a couple,
Yeah.
right? And so when we think of ourselves going through life as travelers in this world versus a student in a course or a student in a degree program, if we think of ourselves as someone traveling through life, what is it that I need to learn right now? And if I'm someone who's learning to build tables, to become a carpenter, it's like, okay, today I'm learning, I keep looking down at my hands. Today I'm learning safety.
Fingers still there.
I'm learning the safety features of all of my equipment. And then you can say when you're done. And you can check it off, whether it's formal or not. And I think that's part of the way I imagine people going through the world, going through life as lifelong learners. It's about knowing what your learning objective is in a particular moment, so that you're not just a happy wanderer consuming stuff, that there is some structure to it. There is a pathway to it. Just like you described, those young kids who can go from 3 to 5 minute great conversation from one to the next, to the next, to the next. You're carefully crafting, or someone is carefully crafting that string of experiences so that it leads to something bigger.
Yeah.
That's the role of the educator. That's the role of the pedagogue or the instructional designer.
Or the parent.
Yeah, well, that's when they put on that hat.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone needs to be doing that. And we need to do it for ourselves. We need to do it for our peers. We need to do it for the people who depend on us.
And it's not saying that a short form experience can't transform over time into a long form interest. You can go from appreciating and collecting these nuggets to being like you and, okay, well, now I'm going to watch an hour-long YouTube on this. I've collected enough nuggets that I feel like I can speak the language and I can really absorb. I have enough background knowledge. I know I'm really interested in this and I'm willing to devote time to this. And now I can go from, if I want to and if I need to, I can go from the nugget approach to something a little bit longer. And that's great. And then maybe that's where the long form comes in as most effective, when someone has mastered all the nuggets, has collected enough to get to the next step. I see the nugget approach to learning as being inclusive as well. And it's very important to me as a philosopher and as an educator that as many people get opportunities to learn as possible. And I don't know how many people, and maybe this is going to be more so the case as we see certain facets of our economy and our social structure change in the next few years. I don't know how many people are going to be able to financially, logistically stop what they're doing and go back for a degree. I don't know how many people are going to be able to afford that. If you've got a family, if you find learning challenging, if you are from a portion of the population that's marginalized or underprivileged, if you are new to the country and you're learning, you're just trying to get your life together here and learn a new language. I don't know how many people are going to have the luxury, have the privilege of being able to stop and learn in a long form. I think the nuggets may be a way in to learning for a lot of people who would normally be excluded. And that feels so important to me, that everyone have have the opportunity to, even if it just is in little bites over a long period of time, to get there as well.
As much as I would love to be able to revamp the entire world's education system to be more egalitarian, more fair, and more pedagogically
I'm going to need to
sound.
stretch first.
Let's talk practicalities, though. What can educators, parents, individuals, what can we do today to take advantage of what I think are non-controversial statements, that smaller, more engaging bits of learning are better?
I'm lucky I'm a children's author. So I get to see this all the time. That's kind of what I expect of the material that I produce, that it's going to be short, that someone's going to sit down with their child and read a story and pull some big questions out of it. And it's going to lead to, a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of discussion, maybe some family bonding, and it's going to happen within the span of 5 or 10 minutes. Hopefully, more than once. Hopefully it happens a lot. But I think there are ways we can work this into the way we live and the way we learn. And I think we all have to, by necessity, start thinking of ourselves as lifelong learners. That you don't just, when we speak of our education, when did you learn? What did you learn? Where did you learn? We don't just say, well, I have this degree from this place in this subject area. That we say, I have learned this and this and this. And it may have been on a weekend, and it may have been while you were watching TV. It may have been, I took a course online. It may have been a million little moments. But we start thinking of ourselves automatically, by default, as lifelong learners, because we may need to be. That may be how learning in the future happens. How about you?
Well, as they say, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And at this moment, I am a corporate learning hammer. And I can think of instances just from the last 24 or 48 hours on calls with clients, talking about and thinking about how to drive up the engagement of past learning experiences that were not successful. And I will be very careful to generalize these stories, but imagine a scenario where a highly decorated expert lectured on Zoom for 2 hours, and all that everyone saw was the top of this man's head. And all they heard was him reading his script. And how do you refactor that kind of experience so that they get to benefit from the wisdom, the knowledge that's there? Well, you certainly support that presenter in a way that he doesn't need to be reading. Let him tell a couple stories, record those stories, put the rest in slides, put the rest in pre-recorded bits, put the rest into little interactive pieces. Let it be a panel conversation. There are a myriad of ways that you can drive up the engagement of things so that it is not death by PowerPoint. And also, the intention is to take it from being a live experience to being a blended experience. Those individual moments, we can absorb someone's expertise. Let that be delivered live. Let there be Q&A. Let that be a panel. Then let the asynchronous stuff fill in the gaps. Let that be where someone practices or reinforces that knowledge or investigates stuff on their own. But there are so many answers, which makes this whole field really exciting to me.
That's a really important point. We have tools to deliver nuggetified learning that weren't there. Yeah, no, I like that word. We have brushes in our, in our artist kit now that we didn't used to have, and both sort of formal, learning management systems and platforms and that sort of thing. I want to submit that social media could be a critical part of this too. And not that there isn't a lot of junk on social media, and you definitely have to put on your critical thinking hat to wade through the garbage and misinformation. But there are ways that you can use, even kind of fluffy social media platforms to make these wonderful nugget learning experiences.
Exactly.
And have them be accessible and fun and interesting.
And often that critical thinking process of filtering through and finding good content out in the ether is something that can really engage people.
It's a nugget in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a food-related metaphor.
Okay.
What if we think of creating the perfect bite? sometimes you get these chefs who take a spoon or a tiny little, a pinch bowl or something
And
like
they've
that.
got their tweezers.
Yes, they're tweezers, and everything is just so, and it's one bite. And what if we saw ourselves as educators and trainers creating perfect bites instead of like, I'm making a huge pot of spaghetti and you're going to eat it all?
I love that analogy. And can I add to it?
Yes.
Now imagine if we set out a buffet of all of the ingredients and we allowed each learner to assemble from the pieces their own bite.
Their own perfect bite.
And now the amount of effort that is required on the part of the instructor is to create stuff that lives on, that is massively reusable, that doesn't just get bitten, but is available en masse for all kinds of people to assemble into their own bite.
I like the ownership and autonomy that gives learners too. And that you're teaching them to assemble their own perfect bites, even when you're not their teacher anymore, even when you're not their trainer and you're not involved, that they know what goes into a perfect bite of learning for them long into the future.
Well, and at the risk of extending this analogy ad absurdum, someone really needs to be watching to make sure they don't just take the dessert.
Shut your mouth. What's wrong with just dessert? I see where you're going.
Yeah, I think before we go too much further into the food analogies, I think we need to wrap this up and have lunch.
I have another sort of food analogy to wrap it up. I think seeing learning as this lengthy, giant wall of
impenetrable
time, it can be really overwhelming for a million different reasons. Whether learning in general is challenging to you, or you don't have the time or the effort, or you see yourself as being too old or done with school. I kind of like to think of it in terms of that old saying, what's the best way to eat an elephant? And please don't eat elephants. Leave the elephants alone.
I know.
But in our imagination, what's the best way to eat an elephant?
One perfect bite at a time.
One perfect bite at a time.
Thanks for learning with us.
If today's conversation sparked something for you, share it with someone you care about, or someone you're still figuring things out with.
You can find us online or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget,
we are all unfinished minds. Let's keep learning.